So a lot of people have been asking when I'm going to move on from talking about Voltron, because, at this point, it's gotten a little stale in terms of things that I try to talk about. Well, consider this fun little factor. If this is something that's boring to hear me talk about, imagine how I feel watching it. Whenever it comes around to the time where I'm supposed to be watching an episode of Voltron, Defender of the Universe, I suddenly feel a huge drop in motivation. It is so hard to force myself to watch an episode of this show. I literally will turn it on for like 5 seconds, and then I'll immediately turn it back off and just pace around the house for a few hours. Some of you might be wondering why I'm still forcing myself to watch this if this is the case. Well, my intent in watching this show was to understand more about classic variations of Voltron so I could then enjoy and appreciate the Netflix reboot even more. Here's the deal. I wanted to know all I could about what Voltron is and what it represents to people, so I could then imagine how I would design a modern interpretation. The very thing that exists right now. And to be honest, most of what I would take into a new Voltron I've already seen. I'd strip down the pilot story, take the best elements from the American and the Japanese variation, and I'd run with what I had from there. But I've been patiently waiting for the final important element to finally be introduced. Voltron Episode 12 does not include that element. I don't know how I'm supposed to be able to pretend that any of this stuff surprises me anymore. If this had been the first episode of Voltron, I would have had a field day making fun of it. Oh look, the bad guys are mining for a raw material called pneumonium. That kind of sounds like pneumonia. You could write like 2.5 solid jokes about that. The problem with reviewing a show this old is that it lasts forever and they clearly never had any reason or an absolute drive to change anything about it. So something I complain about being wrong with the first episode is still gonna be wrong with episode 84. It's like I'm yelling at a brick wall as loud as I possibly can. And then I'm supposed to be mad when the brick wall doesn't change its ways. Episode 12 is important to the Voltron continuum in some sense, in that it's the first episode of the show where the Voltron Force leaves the boring, empty litter box that is their home planet. So when I imagined Voltron, I had this idea in my head of this epic force who goes across all of time and space, fighting all of their foes, wherever they might be. And it's not hard to see where I got that idea, because that's kind of what the intro looks like the show would be about. But I am pretty sure that in later episodes, the Voltron Force does a lot more of that hyperspace full jump stuff, where they just show up at random planets and blow stuff up for the rights of all that is good, or however they would describe it. This show is so boring. I'm sorry, it is. It's just unwatchable. Do I need to really talk about this story? Do I need to? I don't think I do. Oh, these characters look like kids from Johnny Quest. Ding. The Voltron team doesn't trust a stranger for the first time, and it's the first time the stranger isn't secretly evil and working for the Drool. Ding. Oh, the animation is just as bad as it was the last time I made fun of it. Dang. The Voltron Force goes to the planet Nemo and they mess up the Emperor's birthday or whatever. Episode 13 of Voltron is another friend or foe story where you can tell that it's the witch if you just look at the title, and they tell you that it's the witch at the beginning, so you're just waiting for the characters to figure out that it's the witch. So fuck that one. Episode 14 of Voltron is one where we finally meet the main villain that a lot of people connect with Voltron, despite the fact that he's not introduced until episode 14. Of the most boring show of all time. So this is Prince Lotor. You may notice that he happens to look exactly like the previous fake prince we saw, except that he's like purple. So Lotor is the child of Emperor Zoltan, or whatever the hell his name is, and he's apparently good at battle strategies. He shows up and makes fun of how the Drool forces keep being stopped by the Voltron Force, and he says that it's giving hope to their enemies. And rebellions are built on hope. So then they decide that it's Yurok's fault because he's just an incompetent leader and Lotor is going to take his place. I'm surprised that the writers of Go Line, I guess, would decide to get rid of this character. I mean, who could ever forget about Yurok? Or whatever the fuck his name is in Japan. If you get rid of Yurok, you won't be able to reuse the same 3 animation cells over and over and over again in every single episode. So then we cut to the Castle of Lions, where Pidge is hanging around with the mice and is trying to teach them tricks. I hope you realize that I've never been ironic when I say that Pidge and the mice are the best parts of this show. A smile bridges across my face every time they show up. Any Voltron adaptation that does not have the space mice is probably terrible. Every time the show tries to be serious or tries to look badass, it sucks because this was made in a time before those things existed. but whenever the show is fun, it's actually kind of mildly watchable. Prince Lotor goes down to the castle and tells them to surrender or face destruction. Then he sees the princess, and he suddenly breaks his concentration.
And who are you, my pretty?
Well, my name is Pidge.
So Lotor says that if one of the members of the Lion Force comes down and fights him in person, that he'll use that to decide the end of the Aerostrial confrontation. And Pidge is the one who accepts immediately because Pidge kicks all of the ass. I will admit that there is something kind of funny about whenever the show introduces a new idea. It immediately sparks the old magic that episode 1 originally had to it. But that elevated level of a watchable, memorable terribleness usually only lasts like the one episode. Keith and Lotor fight. The animation isn't very good at all. Keithor hits him with a rock and declares that he's going to destroy the Voltron force on the planet, but then the lions show up and they fight Yurak, who has been turned into some sort of 100-foot bat beast. Keith wakes up, gets the Black Lion there, they form Voltron, yada yada yada, blah blah blah, who cares anymore? So most episodes from here on out are basically looking like they're going to switch between all of the previous gimmicks that we've seen so far. Episodes where a new character is introduced and we have to wait for it to be revealed if the person is evil or not. Episodes where they go to another planet and save it just for the hell of it. And of course, episodes where Lotor wants the castle / the princess / the Lion Force, and he fails by the end of the storyline. Episode 15 is the final story I want to talk about. There's several very good reasons for this. Number 1, it's the last one on YouTube. Number 2, I'm pretty sure it's the last one in the first box set. Number 3, I fucking hate this show. So Laura wakes up super early to get to the lions before anyone else so she can attempt to pilot the Black Lion. When the rest of the team shows up, it's basically like, I call shotgun. But I always call shotgun. But I'm already in shotgun. Aww. So then they fight Lotor's forces, and Lotor talks about how he wants to capture the Blue Lion so he can have the princess. I know what you're thinking, and no, sadly he does not accidentally capture Keith and try to add Keith to his harem. If that had happened, I probably just would have immediately watched like 10 more episodes. Lotor goes back home frustrated and hangs out with his albino, blonde-haired harem as he groans about the fact that he still doesn't have Allura. I really don't want to watch this show anymore. It's getting gross. Then everyone's mad at Allura for using the Black Lion without asking. Allura argues that she only did it because one day Keith will need to return to Earth, and she needs to know by then how to pilot the shuttle in that instance. It probably would have made more sense just to try to justify this by bringing up the part of the last episode where Keith was out of commission for like half an hour. But hey, in order for the writers to know about that little tidbit, I would need to go back in time using a time machine I don't currently have. It's in my car, I don't feel like getting it. So then Allura cries because she has girly emotions. Aww. Laura wants to exchange the safety of Allura's kingdom for Allura. And Allura's an idiot, so she buys into it. The rest of the team has to save her. There, I'm done. This garbage isn't what people think of when they think of Voltron. And while some people may argue that by refusing to finish this series, I'm abandoning any claim that I have any serious critical power over understanding what does and doesn't work, those people happen to be morons and I don't take them seriously. I'm sure there's plenty more storylines that I could talk about for hours on end, as well as a lot more moments that would make me laugh a lot, if I were to see them play out. I didn't even get to the episode where the castle turns into a spaceship, or the one where the space mice make their own miniature Voltron force. But I feel like I've gotten out of this just about as much as I wanted to, and now I want to move on with my life. A lot of you are probably expecting me now to go ahead and watch the Voltron show that's currently relevant and trending. That's because you're smart and you don't hate yourself. Apparently I do, so join me next time as I review the same thing but in a different language. Kill me.